In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. A young man walked the rain-soaked streets of New York in late August. He was returning home from a time serving in a soup kitchen. He was reflecting on his experience and a particular encounter that he had that afternoon. A co-worker had said that he saw a man in the soup line who said, "Look like Jesus." He had a shaggy beard, sandals, worn-out clothes, a glow in his eye. He said he looked just like the pictures that he had seen of them. Christ comes through every foreign and familiar face if you expect Jesus to be present. Well, so he pondered these things. And of course, in New York, he was looking straight ahead rather than invite trouble by looking at the people around him. And he passed by a large Gothic church on his walk, and he noticed it must be trash day because he saw piles of rubbish stacked against the curb. And on top of one pile of refuse, a little glint, a reflection caught his eye. Of all the things to throw away, someone had put a cross on top of the garbage. It didn't seem quite right somehow, so he pulled it from the trash and stood there looking at it. The cross was well worn, simple, made of wood, and it was a good 2 feet, 24 inches in length. It had the letters and a little banner on the top, I-N-R-I, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. Clearly it was once a crucifix, but the figure of Jesus had been removed sometime long ago. This empty cross intrigued him. Not sure what to do, he couldn't leave it in the trash, so he decided to take it with him. He boarded the subway soon after and had nowhere. He quickly realized where to put this 2-foot cross. He had no bag or no box. It was too big to fit anywhere, so he carried it with him in his lap. You can imagine in New York the looks and comments on the subway that he received. They were mixed at best. Some people thought and asked, "Are you a street artist, a street preacher? Are you a protester?" Most simply thought he was a nut. Everyone expected him to say something. He's supposed to do something with this thing that he has. He was obviously making a statement. But he sat there in the subway in silence, praying, imagining where the figure of Christ might be. Where could he expect to find Jesus? Well, today is the first Sunday of the season of Advent, and it begins the church's new year. Now, the name of the season, Adventus, means arrival. It means coming. The season is 4 weeks of preparation, of expectation. Normally, we think of this time as 4 weeks preparing for the arrival of Christ at Christmas, and it is that, but there's more to the story. Layered alongside that preparation for Christmas is a theme of anticipation of Christ's second coming in glory. It is the future reign of Lord of all creation, that which is broken is made whole, the way God intended the world to be, a redemption for all. Now, we don't dwell on this second theme of Advent very often, at least not consciously. Yet week after week, we say the words to remind us of this belief that we have. It's in the Creed. Christ will come again in glory to judge the living and the dead, and his kingdom shall have no end. Now, this is not a prediction of when Jesus will return. It's not a prediction of how that might happen exactly. Advent is a proclamation that Christ continually enters the world. Now, the disciples, those who follow Jesus most closely, they all believed that to the very core of their being, and they thought Jesus was going to return after his resurrection ascension, that Jesus would return any day, and certainly within their lifetime. Most of the early church and the Apostle Paul believed this too. They thought Jesus was coming back any day. Read Paul's letters with that in mind. The disciples expected Jesus to be present to them at any moment. Do we expect Jesus to come at all? Well, by the time this Gospel of Matthew was written, many of those who had first known Jesus, known him personally, they had died. And Israel had not entered into its golden messianic age, but was still occupied by foreigners, the Romans. It was a time of uncertainty, fear, anger, anxiety, and change. None of what they believed would happen had occurred yet. No restoration of Israel, no Lord return, so what would the future bring? Now, our passage in Matthew picks up these themes in two distinct ways. The first is to claim that no one knows when Christ will return, not even the angels, not the Lord himself. Only God the Father knows. It's the first line in today's gospel. But this affirms that Christ will return. Matthew then focuses on the attitude of the faithful in preparation for Christ's return. That is, we look for Jesus everywhere. We don't know the day, the hour, a million years, or tomorrow, but we live our lives preparing that Christ might be back at any moment. The gospel gives three, to us, very strange examples. The first is a reference to Noah and the flood. That's the guy who built the ark, the big boat. It's a call to prepare as Noah did while everyone goes about their daily business. That is, everybody is getting married and eating and drinking and carrying on, and Noah's entire life at that point was to focus on preparing for God in his life. The second example is pairs in which one is taken and one is left. Now, I learned as a kid this meant the rapture. If you were right with God, you'd be taken up to heaven, and everybody else, too bad. But rather than look at it as that, which serves to frighten the faithful and drive off those who are not, think of it in a different way, one that would appreciate the historical context. In Jerusalem, Roman soldiers roamed all over the place. They were the law of the land. When the Roman army comes in force, one person will be taken in death, and the other one will be left alone. That actually happened. There was a Jewish revolt that left many dead. The city later would lie in ruins. The great temple in Jerusalem would be destroyed in 70 AD, not a few years after this gospel was written. On the final example, Jesus compares the second advent to a thief coming in the night, even stranger still. That is, no one knows when Christ will return, but it is likely to be the least expected time and in the least expected way. All of these examples call us to be ready for his arrival, to expect to meet Jesus in unexpected ways. In Advent, we observe, we prepare for Christ's first coming at Christmas and then his return in glory. Well, I spoke with a young man who found that empty cross on the trash pile. That was a completely true story, not one that I made up. He's a priest now, and the cross hangs on the wall in his office. It reminds him to expect, to look for Jesus to return in unexpected people and places. And that's the real message of Advent. Jesus continually enters the world and comes into our lives. Christ resides not just up in heaven, but in the gutter, in the ghetto, in the world, and in our hearts, in a sinner and saint. Christ was, in fact, in the man who looked like Jesus in the line for soup. But Jesus is in every person, every familiar, every foreign face, if we would open our eyes and expect the Lord to come. Amen.